So let me describe to you here what we call the path to action. Path to action. Fairly simple. See and hear, we tell ourselves a story. That generates a feeling, which then drives an action. This became very apparent to us as we were working one day in the healthcare industry. We found a young nurse who was describing one of her first days on the job. She was full of enthusiasm, ready to work, right? Ready to serve. She was in the business because she wanted to make a difference with clients, with patients, save lives, right? Trying to alleviate some of the suffering that people experience. So she's in this situation. She's looking around, everyone's moving around. A doctor who typically didn't come down to the floor but was there because he had a patient walks out of a room where there was a sick patient. And he looks around and he sees her over there and he says, "You, come here." She walks over and says, "Hi, Dr. So-and-so, my name is..." "I don't need to know your name. You're not going to be here long enough for me to learn it. I have a patient, however, here who requires some specific attention. I've written down on this piece of paper exactly what needs to be done. No more, no less. Do you think you can handle it?" Now put yourself in her position. What's going on in your mind? This is where the path to action comes into play. Let's take a step back and see how it unfolds. The first part of this is that we see, hear, or otherwise observe something. Put yourself in the nurse's position. What was it that she saw, heard, or observed? If you remember back from the story, she's at the post, she sees people walking around, she sees the doctor walk out of the room. And then she gets this treatment, which isn't as professional as she'd expect. Now, it doesn't just stop there. Here's where it gets really kind of interesting. We tell ourselves a story. We have biases. We have filters through which we sift this information, these observations. We create a whole scenario. What does this mean about what's going on? What does this mean about me? So what's the story that she might be telling here? A lot of you might imagine. She's telling that story that says, this doctor, he's arrogant, he's rude, he's inconsiderate, and I have a lot of evidence that tells me I'm right because all doctors are that way. Now this story creates the feeling. If that's the story you're telling and you're this nurse, how does that make you feel? Hey, can you almost feel it starting to rise up, that energy, that emotion, frustration, dislike? And in that emotional state, we make choices about which actions will lead us to the results that we want. But so often, we fool ourselves into taking actions that lead us away from those results rather than closer to those results. Now, real quick, where do we usually catch ourselves on this path to action? Okay. Woo, way over here, right? We're way down here saying, how did I get here? We want to have a skill that helps us do two things. One, when we find ourselves way over here, to be able to retrace our path. Get back to the point where we have the highest leverage, which tends to be that story. We don't have control over the observations. Don't feel like we have much control over the feelings. We do have a lot of control over that story that we tell. So if we can get back to that story and take a look at it, this helps us in another way of catching ourselves closer to the time that we're telling our stories so we can avoid some of our worst reactions. So, taking a look at the story, there's three types of story that we tend to tell. The victim, the villain, and the helpless. Sometimes we get all three, the trifecta, right, that help us feel good about acting in ways that we typically wouldn't act. So this victim, villain, helpless story, if we can take a look at it, analyze it, and tell a different story, it can be so powerful. The victim story is where we cast ourselves as innocent bystanders. There's nothing else I could do. It's almost the martyr story. The villain story is the opposite. When we look at others, we make them the sum total of their vices. That they wake up every morning thinking and scheming about ways to make us miserable. And then this helpless story. What else can I do? It's just the way the organization is. That's just our culture. And these can be so powerful. I was working with an executive at one point. Now, this executive had some struggles with a colleague on the executive team. His name was Shane, and he had a lot of disagreements with Paul. I'd been asked to coach both of them to see if we could bridge some of the gaps and rifts that had kind of opened up over the course of their relationship. And as we were talking, Shane and I, about the things that he would need to do and how he could repair the damage that had been done, he stopped me in the middle of my conversation. He says, "You don't get it. He's no angel." What is he insinuating here? Saying he's no angel, he's kind of the devil, right? If you knew him, you would know. And it was so powerful to be able to go back and take a look at this story, the villain story, and start to talk with Shane and say, while it's true that he may be no angel, it's probably true that he's more than a devil. And that there are lots of contributing factors that go into creating this story. Those who don't have power over the story that dominates their life, power to change it, power to deconstruct it, power to modify it as times change, truly become powerless because they can't think new thoughts. The interesting thing here is, first you control the story, you create it, you give it life, then it controls you. What kind of stories are you telling? By shifting how we tell these stories, we can change how that interaction unfolds, what happens as a result. If you're able to grab a hold of these stories, really understand where you might be telling a story, and fill in the rest of the information, tell a more accurate story, you'll find that you'll move quicker towards your results. You'll have more of a desire because those emotions will be kept at bay. So good luck in your crucial conversations as you go out and start to master those stories.